In September 1939, following the outbreak of World War II, Himmler formed the Realm Main Security Office to bring all police forces and the SD together under one umbrella. He again placed Heinrich in command. Under Himmler's leadership, the SS developed its own military branch, which later evolved into the Waffen-SS. Nominally under the authority of Himmler, the Waffen-SS developed a fully militarized structure of command and operations. It grew from 3 regiments to over 38 divisions during World War II, serving alongside the army, but never being formally part of it. Viewing the SS as an order along the lines of the Teutonic Knights, he had them take over the Church of the Teutonic Order in Vienna in 1939. He began the process of replacing Christianity with a new moral code that rejected humanitarianism. An SS naming ceremony was to replace baptism, marriage ceremonies were to be altered, a separate SS funeral ceremony was to be held in addition to the Christian ceremonies, and SS-centric celebrations of the summer and winter solstices were instituted. When Hitler and his army chiefs asked for a pretext for the invasion of Poland in 1939, Himmler, Heinrich, and Heinrich Himmler masterminded and carried out a false flag project codenamed Operation Himmler. German soldiers dressed in Polish uniforms undertook border skirmishes which deceptively suggested Polish aggression against Germany. The incidents were then used in Nazi propaganda to justify the invasion of Poland. At the beginning of war against Poland, Hitler authorized the killing of Polish civilians, including Jews and ethnic Poles. The SS task forces had originally been formed by Heinrich to secure government papers and offices in areas taken over by Germany before World War II. The SS task force units were repurposed as death squads, and by the end of 1939 they had murdered some 65,000 intellectuals and other civilians. Under Himmler's orders, these squads were also tasked with rounding up Jews and others for placement in ghettos and concentration camps. Germany subsequently invaded Denmark and Norway, the Netherlands and France, and began bombing Great Britain in preparation for Operation Sea Lion. On June 21, 1941, the day before the invasion of the Soviet Union, Himmler commissioned the preparation of the General Plan for the East. The plan was finalized in July 1942. It called for the Baltic states, Poland, West Ukraine, and Belarus to be conquered and resettled by 10 million German citizens. The current residents would be expelled for the east, starved, or used for forced labor. The plan would have extended the border of Germany 620 miles to the east. Himmler expected that it would take 20 to 30 years to complete the plan, at a cost of 67 billion Reichsmarks. In August 1941, Himmler attended the shooting of 100 Jews in Minsk, Belarus. Nauseated and shaken by the experience, he was concerned about the impact such actions would have on the mental health of his SS men. He decided that alternate methods of killing should be found. On his order, by early 1942, the camp of Auschwitz had been greatly expanded, including the addition of gas chambers, where victims were killed using the pesticide Zyklon B. Himmler visited the camp in person on July 17 and 18, 1942. He was given a demonstration of a mass killing using a gas chamber in Bunker 2 and toured the building site of the new IG Farben plant being constructed at the nearby town of Monowitz, occupied Poland. Himmler was a main architect of the Holocaust, using his deep belief in the racist Nazi ideology to justify the murder of millions of victims. The Nazis planned to kill Polish intellectuals and restrict non-Germans in the general government, and conquer territories to a 4th grade education. The Nazis wanted to breed a master race of racially pure Nordic Aryans in Germany. As an agronomist and farmer, Hitler was acquainted with the principles of selective breeding, which he proposed to apply to humans. He believed that he could engineer the German populace through eugenics to be Nordic in appearance within several decades of the end of the war. On July 20, 1944, a group of some of the highest-ranked members of the German armed forces, led by Claus von Stauffenberg, attempted to assassinate Hitler, but failed to do so. The next day, Himmler formed a special commission that arrested over 5,000 suspected and known opponents of the regime. Hitler ordered brutal reprisals that resulted in the execution of more than 4,900 people. On June 6, 1944, the Western Allied armies landed in northern France during Operation Overlord. On September 26, 1944, Hitler ordered Himmler to create special army units, People's Storm. All males aged 16 to 60 were eligible for conscription into this militia. Over the protest of Armament Minister Albert Speer, who noted that irreplaceable skilled workers were being removed from armament production. Because of severe shortages in weapons and equipment and lack of training, members of the People's Storm were poorly prepared for combat, and about 175,000 of them lost their lives in the final months of the war. On January 25, 1945, in spite of Himmler's lack of military experience, Hitler appointed him as commander of the hastily formed Army Group Vistula to halt the Soviet Red Army's Vistula. General Heinz Guttenlein talked to Himmler on February 9th and demanded that Operation Solstice, an attack from Pomerania against the northern flank of Marshal Georgy Zhukov's First Belarusian Front, should be in progress by the 16th. Himmler argued that he was not ready to commit himself to a specific date. Given Himmler's lack of qualifications as an army group commander, General Guttenlein concluded that Himmler was trying to conceal his incompetence. The offensive was launched on February 16, 1945, but soon the troops were stuck in rain and mud, facing minefields and strong anti-tank defenses. Himmler ordered the offensive to stop on the 18th by a directive for regrouping. Hitler officially ended Operation Solstice on February 21st and ordered Himmler to transfer a corps headquarters and 3 divisions to Army Group Center. Himmler was unable to devise any viable plans for completion of his military objectives. Under pressure from Hitler over the worsening military situation, Himmler became anxious and unable to give him coherent reports. When the counterattack failed to stop the Soviet advance, Hitler held Himmler personally liable and accused him of not following orders. Himmler's military command ended on March 20th, when Hitler replaced him as Commander-in-Chief of Army Group Vistula. Himmler's failure and Hitler's response marked a serious deterioration in the relationship between the two men. In early 1945, the Nazi war effort was on the verge of collapse. Himmler considered independently negotiating a peace settlement. On April 21st, Himmler met with a Swedish representative of the World Jewish Congress to discuss the release of Jewish concentration camp inmates. As a result of these negotiations, about 20,000 people were released in the White Buses operation. On April 23rd, Himmler was at the Swedish consulate in Lübeck, representing himself as a provincial leader of Germany, hoping that the British and the Americans would fight the Soviets alongside what remained of the Wehrmacht. On the evening of April 28th, the BBC ran a news report about Himmler's attempted negotiations with the Western Allies. Hitler had long considered Himmler to be a second only to Joseph Goebbels in loyalty. Hitler flew into a rage at this apparent betrayal and told those still with him in his bunker complex that Himmler's secret negotiations were the worst treachery he had ever known. Hitler ordered Himmler's arrest. Hitler declared both Himmler and Goering to be traitors. He stripped Himmler of all his party and state offices and expelled him from the Nazi Party. Hitler named Grand Admiral Karl Dönitz as his successor. Himmler maintained that he was entitled to a position in Dönitz's interim government now that Adolf Hitler was dead. Himmler believed the SS would be in a good position to restore and maintain order after the war. Dönitz repeatedly rejected Himmler's overtures and initiated peace negotiations with the Allies. Dönitz wrote a letter on May 6 formally dismissing Himmler of all his posts. Rejected by his former comrades and hunted by the Allies, Himmler attempted to go into hiding. With a small band of companions, he headed south on May 11th to Friedrichskoog, without a final destination in mind. On May 21st, Himmler and 2 aides were stopped and detained at a checkpoint set up by former Soviet POWs. Over the following 2 days, he was moved around to several camps and was brought to the British 31st Civilian Interrogation Camp near Lunenburg on May 23rd. The duty officer began a routine interrogation, and Himmler admitted to who he was. Himmler was taken to the headquarters of the 2nd British Army in Lunenburg, where a doctor conducted a medical exam on him. The doctor attempted to examine the inside of Himmler's mouth, but the prisoner was reluctant to open and jerked his head away. Himmler then bit into a hidden potassium cyanide pill and collapsed on the floor. He was dead within 15 minutes. Shortly afterwards, Himmler's body was buried in an unmarked grave near Lunenburg. The grave's location still remains unknown to this day. In 2008, the German news magazine Der Spiegel described Himmler as one of the most brutal mass murderers in history and the architect of the Holocaust. If you liked the video, please press the like button. If you haven't subscribed, please do. You can follow me on Twitter and on Instagram, links in the description. And if you want to financially support the channel, please do so by going over to my Patreon page. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching, and farewell.